You are my heroine, sweet tasted poison pill.
And welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was a bit of fun. Nothing like having a look at one of the Axis of Evil, but anyway, that was last week. And so on to this week's episode of the show. Obviously it's a milestone episode of the show, episode number 600. Never thought that I would actually get to 600 episodes of the show. I'll just carry on going and see where it takes me, shall we say, until I kind of run out of samples or something like that. Anyway, I thought, obviously, as it's a milestone episode of the show, I'd have to pull out the big guns, as they say, well, I'd like to think that I've done so. So it's kind of, yes, okay, I've gone back to Bruichladdich. You know that I have a huge soft spot for Bruichladdich, have done for sort of like so many years now. Obviously the relationship I have with the distillery these days is nowhere near as close as what it used to be, certainly not when it was obviously owned by the guys from Murray McDavid. I wouldn't say that we were, best buds, shall we say, but, I had a fairly close relationship with them. Obviously, as you probably well remember, or as I've probably said on numerous occasions, back in 2003 I was invited to go and spend a week working up at the distillery. The whole point of it was to sort of trial their idea for a distillery school. It was a little bit kind of hit and miss, shall we say, but that seemed to be kind of Isla for you. Yeah, it was a whole lot of fun, and it was certainly an eye-opener, and it was probably the biggest sort of learning experience about sort of how distilleries operated, and how whiskey itself was actually made. It was very, very enlightening. I suppose I wish I probably had a better knowledge of whiskey back then, certainly when Jim kind of left me alone in one of the warehouses, and it was kind of like, I really wish my tasting notes were better, but they weren't. It was fun, and something that, I will probably always remember. But anyway, so I thought, like I said, bring out the big guns. I've done Oxmoor, done Bruichladdich on numerous occasions, probably thrown in a few Port Charlottes during the tasting, but I've never done an entire episode of the show on Port Charlotte. So a big thank you to Douglas Laing, to Randy Contro, to everybody that's given the samples for today's episode of the show. One or two of them were not actually direct samples from Syrah, Remy, but she sent me samples in the past, so just like to say a big thank you for those. So I think this is going to be an intriguing look. Port Charlotte itself was the former name of the Lockendale distillery, which was located in the village of Port Charlotte, which is about 2 miles south of Bruichladdich. It operated from 1829 to 1929. Like I said, originally called the Port Charlotte Distillery. I don't know when it changed its name. Certainly by the time Alfred Barnard visited it during the mid-1880s, it was called Lockendale at the time, and was actually a pretty big distillery with regards to its output. Certainly he said it was making 128,000 gallons of spirit per annum, and just to put that into a bit of context, at the same time Lagavulin was only producing 75,000, and Ardbeg was producing 250,000. So it was, like I said, not a small distillery. Doesn't seem to have had a particularly sort of remarkable history. It's no ghosts or fires or explosions or stuff like that, not as far as I could find out anyway. And it was eventually shut by DCL in 1929, and I think some of the obvious buildings are still there. All the kit was stripped out and a long time ago, and so, the buildings have been used for various things. Apparently a creamery, a garage, a youth hostel at one point. But what has remained is two fairly substantial warehouses, brick warehouses, which form the picture for today's episode of the show, and they are still currently used for the maturation of Port Charlotte spirits. So Port Charlotte was initially distilled back in 2001. This was sort of like, you know, during the kind of like the what if period of Bruichladdich, of Mark Rainier and Jim McEwen, and obviously peated to 40 parts per million, roughly around about the sort of Lefroy and Lagavulin, Ardbeg kind of level of peating. First released by the distillery as PC5 in 2006. First independent release, as far as I'm aware, was in 2004, so it was 3 years old, and it was released by the Cumbray Supply Company. Now, I've obviously had a good rummage around. I know I had some of these samples knocking about, and I have fortunately sort of a reasonable amount actually left of one of the very first independent bottlings. So this was the Port Charlotte bottled by the Alchemist. Now, for those of you that don't know, the Alchemist was a company that was founded by Gordon Wright, who was one of the owners of Bruichladdich at the time. He was an owner of Murray McDavid, and obviously of the Wright family, as they say, you know. And I got to know Gordon quite well, but certainly when I visited in 2003, and for a little while he ran his own independent bottling company and bottled some really intriguing stuff, and then just disappeared in a puff of smoke. I believe he bought a restaurant, and I haven't heard from him in years, so if anybody knows what Gordon's up to or has a contact email or something like that, please let me know. That would be really cool. But so yeah, really cool. So I've got one of the very first bottlings of Port Charlotte, and obviously one of the most recent bottlings to look at, and a few in between, as I say. So I'm hoping this is going to be a really interesting dive into the character of Port Charlotte. And like I said, I've always been a huge fan of Bruichladdich, and always loved the fact that even though they're peated spirit, and like I said, you just go and have a look at the episode of the show I did on Optimal a few weeks ago, you still get the barley, the malt, you still get the distillery character, even coming through all that kind of wine casks and peat and God knows what else. You know, the Bruichladdich character is still there, and maybe it's because I know what I'm looking for, but certainly it's evident. So I'm kind of looking forward to this, because I haven't tasted it, and certainly the Alchemist bottling I've not tasted since way back when. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I think this is going to be a fitting episode for the 600th episode. So let's just take a look at today's lineup. So as I said, we're going to kick off with one of the early independent bottlings. So this is the Alchemist Port Charlotte 2001. So one of the very first casks, one would imagine. 5 years old. It was bottled. It was distilled in December of 2001, bottled in January of 2007 at 46%. Next bottling we'll be looking at is the first of the distillery releases. This is PC8 or Ardu, I think is the pronunciation. 60.5%. Obviously 8 years old. I believe released in 2009. Now, I don't know if you can see that the label. Now, this was an interesting bottle, I suppose. Way back when, probably in around about 2009, 2010. I think it was 2010 actually. There was a company sort of doing bespoke 5cl miniature packs, and you could choose which went what into it. And I remember doing I can't remember if it was a peated one or if it was just an Isla one, but obviously the PC8 was one that was included. So again, haven't tasted that since 2010, so really looking forward to that. Next independent bottling is a Douglas Laing Old Particular Port Charlotte. This was a 10-year-old bottled at their standard bottling ABV of 48.4%. it was a port hogshead. Now, yeah, I wouldn't have said that was a port hoggy. I mean, there's not a huge amount of colour there, a huge amount of character. Oops, it's a Freudian slip there. So yes, it was cask number DL11030, distilled in October of 2005, bottled in February of 2016, and like I said, it was bottled at 48.4%. Then we're going to move on to the three of the I forget what they call them now, actually, the sort of cask series or whatever, I forget now. This is SC01. It was a vatting of 16 sherry butts, both first and second fill ex-American oak, and then married together and finished in ex-Sauternes cask, distilled in 2012, bottled in February of 2022 at 56.2%. So looking forward to that. Next bottling was called PMC01. So this was 9 years old. It was the spirit was initially aged in first fill bourbon barrels for 4 years, and then it was filled into ex-Pomerol casks in 2017 and spent roughly 5 years in those casks, distilled in 2013 and bottled in 2023. And the final cask expiration series, bottling, whatever it was called, is the SYC01. So this again was like all the others, peated to 40 parts per million, aged initially well, there was aged for 79% or 75%, sorry, was the original spirit was aged in first fill bourbon and 25% in second fill bourbon. It was then filled into first fill ex-Syrah casks in 2018, where it resided for roughly 5 years. So distilled initially in 2013, bottled last year at 54.4%. So hopefully that should be a fitting one to finish on. So let's kick off with the Alchemist. Okay, so this is the Alchemist's 5-year-old Port Charlotte. Let's see what the nose gives on this one, shall we? Really sooty, quite fruity, iodine, medicinal notes. There's a little bit of a hint towards Lefroy going on here on the nose, but it's got a really sweet barley and sweet apricot and cereal. It kind of sits stylistically sort of somewhere between Lefroy and Ardbeg. It doesn't quite have the woodiness of Ardbeg, but has the richness of Ardbeg from what I can see. There's a little kind of almost nod to sort of, you know, Pomerol there, a little bit of that sort of, you know, sootiness, that sort of nice smokiness. And for 5 years old, this is remarkably good. I mean, it's got a lovely intensity. I certainly remember that when this came out, was around about the same time as the still young Ardbeg, which I think was probably again around about a similar kind of age, if memory serves me correct. And certainly on a par quality level with that bottling. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. God, he should have carried on with the Alchemist, because he bottled some absolutely gorgeous stuff. Anyway, let's see what the parts like. That's got a lovely progression. The intensity of the peat just builds on the palate. I mean, it starts off with this lovely soft white fruit, apricot, minerals, salt, lots of salt, and then the peat starts to gently build on the mid palate. Starts off a little bit sooty, a little bit of wood spice as well, and just slowly builds, and the medicinal notes kind of come through. and that sweetness kind of lingers. That sort of, it's not just sort of American oak vanillan sweetness. It's got a lovely sweet barleyed character as well, and like I said, apricot, white fruit, it just sits there right the way through. And this is the wonderful thing about peat, is that you initially you kind of think, well, it's not going to work sweet and peat smoke, but it does beautifully, it has to be said. And the cleanliness and the saltiness of the spirit is absolutely gorgeous. It's not in the sort of the woody Ardbeg mould, it's not in the sort of leche kind of smoked meat, bacony kind of character. It just has a lovely freshness to it and a richness and a density, and it's just unique. It is just a gorgeous whiskey all round. It's just so nicely balanced. It's just not overly peated. It's just about right, said Mummy Bear, as they say.
I'm not safe for falling deep. Can't get awake, can't find no sleep.
Okay, so on to the Port Charlotte PC8. So 60.5. Let's see what the nose was on this end, shall we? Oh, that's a bit of a blast, it has to be said. So the alcohol is emphasising the cereal, the medicinal notes, the windswept coastal peat, the iodine, the menthol, the bog myrtle. It's a bit of a take no prisoners nose, but in saying that, there's again that lovely richness of fruit that's just sitting beneath that, and it stops it being kind of one-dimensional. There's a little bit of charred wood, a little bit of American oak. It's just the purity of the spirit and the oak. And you know, I know that nowadays all distilleries, indies, they're all obsessed with wine casks and different weird casks, and like I keep saying, I think sometimes they just kind of lose sight of how beautiful a good whiskey in an American oak cask can be. It's just that purity of character, and yeah, that's good. I mean, that's everything I remember it to be. It's got the intensity, but it's got the richness of fruit, which is holding the alcohol together. A little bit of tangerine, some citrus coming through now. Oh, stunning. Let's see what that's like. Soot, pure soot, sort of almost kind of briquettes, you know, it's almost like licking a peat briquette. There's vegetation, there's loam, there's iodine, there's medicinal notes, there's bog myrtle, seaweed, salt by the bucketful, really intense. And yet again, underneath that we have some lovely American oak vanillins. We have the fleshy fruit, the apricot, the apple. Again, the balance is stunning, absolutely stunning. Wow, intensity off the charts, and yes, it's masked, but it's 60%, but it's really well integrated. It's kind of just absolutely spot on, it has to be said. And it, like I said, absolute testament to the quality of the spirit that sort of rolls off the stills at Bruichladdich. I mean, if you love peated whiskey, you cannot not be impressed by it. Anyway, let's see what a little drop of water does. Okay, it's a little bit younger now. It's a little bit less in your face. There's more of that kind of sort of green turf and green seaweed, and yeah, a little bit of faints, I would say, just a smidgen there, which is obviously being brought out by the water, and it's not sort of nice peppery note coming through as well. It's kind of in there. It's not sort of OTT. It's not sort of like, you know, you put a little drop of water, the peat disappears, the oak disappears, and you're just left with young raw spirit. I'm not saying that at all. But there is a youthful element there, which is, you know, not unsurprising. Let's see what the pass on now. Chewy, full, very mentholated, very herbal, very bog myrtley, very seaweedy on the finish now, a little bit of pepper as well. Again, lots of rich fruit, not so much kind of peat in inverted commas or peat smoke. Like I said, it's more about the medicinal notes, it's more about the herbal notes, the bog myrtle, the seaweed, the vegetation. Oh, stunning, absolutely stunning. It has to be said.
This is within my mind. We release for a long time.
So let's move on to the old particular Port Charlotte 10-year-old. I certainly remember this being on the shelf, and I think there's a bottle in my collection somewhere. And certainly a bottle of PC8. There might even be a bottle of the Alchemist Port Charlotte. I think I actually have got a bottle somewhere. Oh. Now more oak. It's got that sort of faint kind of porty fruit, a little bit of kind of almost potpourri kind of petals, and a little bit of red fruit, but it's ozone, very ozony. Tar, a little bit of barley, not as much peat as I would expect. I think the oak is just kind of putting a sheen over the intensity of the peat. There's a smokiness there, a little meatiness. It's less medicinal than the previous two, and there's a little bit of black fruit, but not a huge amount. Again, all really nice and harmonious. I think it's a classic example of showing how the cask can certainly take some of the wildness and some of the woolliness, just rounding off the edges. And it's so easy with port casks to just leave a spirit for too long to basically overcook it. This, I think, is just about right. Absolutely fantastic whiskey, it has to be said. See what that's like. Oh, that aftertaste is stunning. I mean, violets, a little bit of black fruit, a little bit of spice, a little bit of tannin, a little bit of vanilla. Oh, chocolatey as well. Oh, peat and chocolate. Oh, what a combination. Peat and dark chocolate. Oh my God. Yeah, so it kind of kicks off again with a little bit more of the portiness on the beginning. It's got that slight sort of syrup coated black fruit to kick off with. Herbal, lightly herbal. Again, not as medicinal or as herbal as the PC8 or the Alchemist bottling, but it's got a herbal character there. A little bit more smokiness on the mid palate. A little dry tannin which mingles in with the peat, so it has a bit of a dryness. There's tar. God, that's bloody good. I mean, that was a hell of a cask, it has to be said. And I know, sort of like, you know, now if you can find an independent bottling of Port Charlotte, well, good luck to start off with, and if you can find it, it's not going to, you know, cost you half a kidney. Good luck as well. But oh, stunning.
You are my heroine, sweet taste of poison.
Okay, so let's move on to the next distillery release. So this is the SC01. So we're now coming up to more modern bottlings, I suppose. So let's see what the nose gives on this, shall we? You can smell that Sauternes. It's quite farmyardy, quite manurey. Again, not as medicinal, but there's some lovely salty notes. There's some citrus. There's some chunky, late harvested honey, salt, earth, dry peat. There's a little bit of dried fruit, a little bit of raisinade fruit, a little bit of sherry coming through. Again, it's all really nicely balanced and harmonious. There's a little bit of heather, possibly, sort of decomposing heather. It's got a lovely kind of sheen. The Sauternes is giving it this lovely honeyed sheen, and again, it works. It really does work. And it's just amazing how, you know, you think sort of peated whiskies shouldn't really work with sweet, you know, things, but it does. It works absolutely amazingly well, and again, it's all really well balanced, and it's just so well put together. So that's on. Quite drying on the finish, lovely progression. Starts with the Sauternes cask. It's got that, you can almost taste the botrytis. Has that sort of earthy, sweet, honeyed character, and then in comes the spice, the licorice, the tar, touch of coconut as well. Earthy peat, slightly medicinal, yeah, a little bit of medicinal. More kind of farmyardy kind of peat on the mid palate. It is a little bit masked, but it's quite salty, and it does sort of, it lingers beautifully, it has to be said. That Sauternes sweetness is just always there throughout the whole palate, and only on the end do you start to get a little bit of the sherry dried fruit, a little bit of raisinated fruit, a little bit of, you know, currants. I mean, again, the casks have taken some of the sort of like the intensity of peat away. It certainly doesn't have, say, the purity of the PC8 or the Alchemist bottling, but the casks have added some lovely complexity, it has to be said, and it's not overdoing the spirit whatsoever, and it's certainly not made it one-dimensional at all. Let's see what a little drop of water does to it now. Right, well, that has suppressed a lot of the oak, and I'm getting more barley and more citrus and American oak and subtler peat, but still a little bit on the manure side. But it's a classic example of what a little drop of water does to a relatively heavily oaked peated malt. It just kind of suppresses it all, and I wouldn't say it leaves the spirit exposed, but it brings more of the spirit character out. And if you have a spirit, and this is the thing, you know, Bruichladdich has an awful lot of character. It's not just sort of like the herbal sort of flowery honeysuckle. It has a real weight of maltiness, which is something that's, I wouldn't say surprised me, but it's not what you, well, it's not, it is what you expect. I mean, it's Bruichladdich at the end of the day, isn't it? Oh, stunning. Let's see what it passes like. A lot softer, sweeter, more Sauternes on the palate, more honeyed, white fruit, a little bitterness, a little kind of woody bitterness with a bit of herbal bitterness as well on the finish. Not so much peat, not so much intensity. I mean, still a lovely palate. Bit of cereal on the aftertaste. I think sort of that kind of, for me, works better without a little drop of water. I personally prefer the complexity and the intensity without a little drop of water, and I don't think it really needs it. I mean, it's only 56.2 for him, you know, so nothing at the end of the day, is it? Right, okay, so let's move on to the PMC01. Let's see what the nose gives on this end, shall we? Quite reserved. Sour, red fruits, coffee, spice, tarry peat, manure, animals, touch of barley. I mean, it's actually quite sort of reserved on the cask frontage, it has to be said. Yeah, there's some. I must admit, I wouldn't say I'm the most au fait with Pomerol, but it's Pomerol. I can never remember right bank, left bank. I mean, I don't do Bordeaux at the end of the day, but it has a sort of like a soft red fruit kind of character. Yeah, it's nice. It's kind of possibly not the most sort of blowing me away nose, it has to be said, but I think it's got again a really nice balance. See what that's on. Earthy, gritty, sour red fruits, spice, tannin, a little bit of tar, a little bit of peat. Quite drying on the finish. The tannins kind of like kick in on the mid palate and kind of last, but they have some lovely spiciness. The spices are kind of like, ooh, tingling my tongue, it has to be said. It's kind of quite subtle by the Port Charlotte standards, it has to be said. I don't know whether that's the cask that has kind of done this to it. I mean, it was pretty straightforward. First fill bourbon for 4 years and then the Pomerol cask, so they haven't done anything weird and wonderful to it, but it really kind of, I'd almost go as far as saying it's quite polite by Port Charlotte standards. It's a lovely whiskey, don't get me wrong, but it's a bit polite, and do you really want polite with Port Charlotte? Anyway, let's put a little drop of water with it and see what that does to it. Well, that's a bit an odd one, it has to be said. The kind of the red fruits have almost kind of disappeared. It's got a kind of almost, not quite Sauternesy, but it's lighter apricots and white fruits, and that's not what I expected, it has to be said. Quite honeyed, marmalade-y. It's just sort of like almost, yeah, it's almost like late harvested wine. It's not quite as kind of fleshy and sort of overtly honeyed as the Sauternes, but the red fruit has disappeared. A lot of the peat has disappeared. It's got that, still got that medicinal note. The pass on. Again, it's quite subtle. It's only a sort of a light raspberry kind of note now from the wine cask. The peat is very, very, very light. It's almost like an echo of peat, a dustiness there. There's some nice spicy notes coming through now, probably coming from the wood. Again, it's very subtle, it's very polite, it's very nice, and I don't mean nice as in that sort of like, that's nice. It's pleasant, but it just seems to be a little bit too polite for Port Charlotte at the end of the day, but still.
I don't care, get lost somewhere, just as long as love is strong.
Okay, so on to the final Port Charlotte of the afternoon. So this is the SYC01, so first fill Syrah cask finish. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I just love Syrah. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's just, you know, it's far more entertaining than the bloody Pomerol, has to be said. It's juicy, it's big, it's rich, it's in your face, it's syrup coated red and black fruits, strawberries, earthy peat, medicinal peat, salt, camphor. This is more like it. This is more intense, more in your face. You know, it's kind of big peat, big wine. But in saying that, again, it's not just one-dimensional. There is an element of barley underneath it. I mean, it's pretty much peat and red wine at the end of the day. And yeah, peat and red wine do work amazingly well. But like I said, this kind of like, you know, really does stomp all over the PMC. A little bit of burnt herbs and ginger. I mean, I just love the intensity of this. I mean, it really is kind of absolutely gorgeous. And yeah, 54.4. Let's see what the pass right. really salty, lots and lots of red fruits, spicy red fruits. Get that herbal, camphory, sort of medicinal note coming through right on the finish. It is quite loaded but with the Syrah cask, and it's very much up front and in your face to start off with. It does start to sort of mellow out towards the mid palate as the spirit character kind of kicks in and comes through, and it's got that sort of earthiness, the saltiness, like I said, the medicinal character sort of right through on the end, a little bit of cereal as well, a touch of bitter spice. It's just got so much more intensity and so much more going on than the Pomerol cask bottling. Maybe that's kind of, I don't know, who knows. It's you know, like I say, always kind of have a more of an affinity for the Rhone than Bordeaux. But anyway, let's see what the nose gives us now. Jammier, sootier. It has removed a lot of the peat and the salt, and it is more cask orientated. Personally, I think I would leave it neat, but yeah, it's still pretty good with a drop of water. So that's right. Very much softer, more polite, a touch more sweetness from the fruit, touch more sweetness from the Syrah casks. Still got some lovely peaty notes. You're not going to get rid of that medicinal note and that slight iodine note that certainly comes through on the finish. So really, really good one to finish on.
You are my hero, sweet taste of poison pill.
Let's sum today's episode of the show. Well, I think this was certainly befitting the 600th episode of the show, and I thought it was yeah, blew me away. And like I said, always been a big fan of Bruichladdich and just love Port Charlotte. The Alchemist bottling, youthful, pure Port Charlotte, had that lovely fruity character along with the herbal and the medicinal peat, and like I said, kind of sat somewhere between a sort of Lefroy and sort of an Ardbeg in sort of character. The PC8, well, I mean, that was just intensity. I mean, 60-odd%. Intense, again, American oak, all the quality and the character of the spirit, a little bit of oak, but just basically supporting the spirit, which personally is what I love. The Douglas Laing, old particular bottling, subtle on the port, it has to be said. It could have been a lot heavier, could have been a lot more overblown, but there was enough port character there, and certainly I think that was an absolutely superb bottling, it has to be said. I'm kind of rushing because I'm running out of time, it has to be said. This could have been an hour-long episode of the show, but you'd have all fallen asleep by then, I imagine. But anyway, the SCO1, the Sauternes finish, stunning, absolutely stunning. Just goes to show how well peated malts can work with the sweetness of the Sauternes casks, and just absolutely gorgeous. Think I would prefer it with water personally than without water, but then I think that goes for pretty much all of the cask finished bottlings. The Pomerol cask I thought was probably the weakest of the three so far. It was just a bit reserved. It was a bit, I suppose, you know, if you look at it in the sort of, you know, those kind of terms, it's a bit highfalutin and a bit sort of up its own, yeah, which does seem to be sort of Bordeaux for you, it has to be said. And it kind of didn't really deliver the goods. It was a bit too standoffish and a bit too reserved for its own good. The Syrah cask, on the other hand, was more like sort of the Southern French. It was kind of like, there you go, in your face, lots of Syrah, lots of peat, and yeah, but it wasn't one-dimensional. There was substance beneath it, shall we say. So, yeah, that was a great one to finish on. So that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. It's been a wild ride, it has to be said. 600 episodes, and well, like I said, I'll carry on going as much as I can. And I've still got a lot of samples that date back quite some time, so I'll keep raiding them from time to time, and hopefully keep entertaining you guys. So anyway, until next week, this week's episode of the show's in the bag. Good afternoon, good dramming.
taste the poison pill. You make me calm on down. Love tragedy #1. You are my heroine. Sweet taste the poison pill.